Good afternoon everyone. Magandang hapon po sa ating lahat. At ito pong okasyon na ito ay isang forum na initiated by the UP Third World Studies Center. And for this afternoon, we are going to look at the local government code, which I think by next month will be in its 20th year of existence. Now, to welcome everyone here to this forum, we have none other than the Vice President for Public Affairs of the University of the Philippines, Dr. Prof. De Vera.
Director Maria Atienza of the Third World Studies Center, my colleague in the National College of Public Administration and Governance, Professor Alex Brillantes, Professor Dante Gatmaytan of the College of Law, my old friend Professor everyone here has taken time out to attend this fourth in the series of discussions organized by the Third World Studies Center. I'd like to welcome everyone to this afternoon's occasion. Republic Act 9500, or the UP Charter, mandates that the University of the Philippines, as the national university, is supposed to provide leadership in higher education and national development. Particularly, the UP Charter requires that the UP must provide leadership as a research university, as a graduate university, and as a public service university. The reason why the Office of the Vice President for Public Affairs is involved in this whole initiative is because the new administration under President Alfredo Pascual takes the public service responsibilities of the university very seriously. In the investiture speech that he delivered last September 15, he particularly mentioned that the world out there, and even within UP, often does not know what we are doing because we don't discuss enough a lot of national issues. And therefore, we are very happy to co-sponsor this activity. This is a co-sponsorship that started some time back. So this is not the first time we're co-sponsoring it. And we are also doing other initiatives to increase the visibility of the university. We are now officially tied up with the Kapihan sa Annabels and the Kapihan Ilustrado. These are two regular Kapihan sessions where we have entered into an agreement with the organizers of the Kapihan to feature issues and experts from the university when they do the regular Kapihan sessions. The Kapihan sa Annabel is every Saturday morning, and the Kapihan sa Ilustrado is Tuesday morning. We of course cannot do this if we don't have institutions like the Third World Studies Center who will do the identification of topics and the selection of speakers. So our role at the system is simply to facilitate the involvement and the initiatives of the university going outwards. And we're very happy that the Third World Studies Center is doing this, and we want to bring this to a wider audience in the coming months. So again, maraming salamat sa inyong lahat, and welcome to this afternoon session.
Thank you, Professor De Vera. Now, I guess some of you might be wondering why this is referred to as the fourth in the series. To explain to us, or rather to give us an overview of the Third World Studies Center Public Forum series, we have the Director of the Third World Studies Center, Professor Atienza.
Vice President Prospero de Vera, Professor George Tigno, Professor Alex Brillantes, Professor Gatmaytan, colleagues from academe, students, friends from civil society, ladies and gentlemen, magandang hapon po sa inyong lahat. So this is our fourth and last in the 2011 Third World Studies Center Public Forum Series. And for those of you who have been attending, the first three of the series, the title of the full forum series is the B.S. Aquino Administration, Possible Perversities, Perverted Possibilities. And for those of you who have also been familiar with the work of the UP Third World Studies Center since its establishment almost 35 years ago, you know that having public fora on very important issues is one of the most important activities, the regular activities of the center. We usually bring together people from different fields and representing different views to discuss very important issues. Some people have expressed some doubts about the theme of this year's forum series as well as the specific titles. Isn't it too early to judge the administration of the current president? Why highlight possible mistakes, skepticism, and areas not being prioritized? From the inception of this forum series, the research staff of the Third World Studies Center was guided by the dictum, the greater the trust, the more intense scrutiny must be. Scrutiny, particularly from the academe, must take place at this point. The President continues to enjoy high trust ratings if we are going to look at the results of the social weather stations and Pulse Asia surveys. He is still in his second year in office and not yet a lame duck president, so he still has a lot to do and he can still do a lot. Hence, it is but timely that skepticism and constructive criticism be raised at this point in order to help concerned sectors understand the trends, the issues, and take action to really make this presidency and this administration different from the previous administration that the president swore to be very different from. The first three fora that we had starting in June this year focused on very timely issues, and all these fora were attended by renowned speakers who raised a lot of interesting analyses, points, and prognostications that continue to be discussed in opinion columns in national broadsheets, online blogs, and social networking sites. In June, Professors Raul Pangalangan and Lydia Yu Jose led discussions on church-state relations in the Philippines. In July, General Danilo Lim, Professor Ricardo Jose, and Ms. Criselda Yaves led the discussions on the role of the military in politics. And in August, Dr. Carol Araujo, Mr. Gary Olivar, and Ms. Ellen Tordesillas led a discussion on public images, slogans, and governance. Because of the inability of some interested audiences, mainly due to physical distance as well as other commitments, to attend the fora in person, the Third World Studies Center has been regularly uploading the videos of the fora online for the benefit of students, members of the academe, civil society, media, and the public who still want to view the fora and contribute in the discussions. For this final installment, we want to focus on the local government code and the presidency. Of course, the timing is just right because the code was signed 20 years ago by President Corazon Aquino. So the 20th anniversary will be next month. The code, which signaled the devolution of powers to local governments, is considered one of the hallmarks of the Cory Aquino presidency as it sought to democratize the country after decades under Marcos. The code is considered trailblazing not only because it gives powers to local governments, but it also contains provisions for people empowerment and participation of the people in governance. Local government units, both successful and unsuccessful, some trailblazing, some progressive, others characterized by continued bad governance and dominance of political families, were thrust into the limelight. There are plenty of academic and policy studies recommending review and amendments to the current provisions of the code, as well as other policy recommendations to strengthen devolution. On October 6, 2009, then presidential aspirant Benigno Aquino made a statement in front of local government executives. To quote him, ang paniniwala ko yung local government unit, dyan ko nababatay kung maayos na gobyerno o hindi. End of quote. He went on to commit for a review of the code, and he said, i-review muna natin yung na-devolve. Yung mga nag-succeed, bakit nag-succeed? Yung nag-fail, bakit? Nag-fail. End of quote. After he became president, President Benigno Aquino has not explicitly made public his intentions about reviewing or amending the law. So, we raise some important questions that we hope we can discuss in this forum. Can the Aquino administration offer transformational leadership without any alteration of the local government code? What failures and missed opportunities will this adherence to the status quo bring about? Or is the current code sufficient and there are other things that need to be fixed instead of the local government code? These are the questions that we hope to answer this afternoon. Since this is also the final installment for the 2011 series, allow me also to thank our two speakers who graciously accepted our invitation this afternoon, and of course our moderator. We also have to thank two very important co-organizers for the forum series. Of course, the Office of the Vice President for Public Affairs. And we're also partnering with the Philippine Political Science Association, the professional association of political science professionals in the country, represented here, of course, by our moderator, Professor Jorge Tigno, who is currently the Vice President of PPSA, and of course, my colleagues in the Department of Political Science, all active members of the Philippine Political Science Association. We also have to thank the College of Arts and Letters Office of the Dean for graciously offering the Claro M Recto Hall for the use of the forum. And of course, let me acknowledge the hardworking staff, the administrative and research staff of the Third World Studies Center who have worked very hard for the forum series to push through. And of course, allow me to thank all of you in advance, the audience, for being here, not only for this particular forum, but also for some familiar faces who have been attending on our forum. So good afternoon and thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Kenza. Now, before I hand over the microphone to our two distinguished speakers for this afternoon, let me first introduce them. Although I don't think they need an introduction because both of them are really well known in the field of local government and local government studies. Nevertheless, please allow me to introduce them. Our first speaker, Dr. Brillantes Jr., is a professor at the National College of Public Administration and Governance and current president of the Philippine Society for Public Administration. His name is actually very much associated with local government and the study of local governments and local government dynamics in the Philippines especially. He served, from the academic side, he served as the Dean of the NCPAC for 6 years from 2004 to 2010. He has a PhD and a Master of Arts degree in political science, I believe, from the University of Hawaii. Although he also comes from UP, having gained his AB and MPA from our institution. He has written a lot, he has produced a lot of work on local governments in the Philippines, as I said. And in government service, he has served as the director of the Local Government Academy as well. He is currently a member of the boards of several organizations like the Local Government Development Foundation, the Galing Pook Foundation, the Philippine Social Science Council, and Ateneo Gawad Kalinga. Our second speaker is Professor Dante Gatmaytan. He is Associate Professor of Law at the University of the Philippines. He teaches constitutional law, local government law, administrative law, and legal history. He began his academic or his career in academia in 1998. But prior to that, he practiced law through public interest law offices, working with rural poor communities affected by environmental and natural resources constraints. He graduated with a bachelor's degree from Ateneo de Manila. He has a law degree from UP and has earned his master's degrees from the Vermont Law School and the University of California at Los Angeles. At present, he's a PhD candidate in law and public policy at Northeastern University in Boston. Professor Gatmaytan, aside from being a member of the faculty at UP Law, also lectures at De La Salle University, has lectured as well at De La Salle University in Manila and Ateneo de Manila. So with these very short introductions, I'm sure they don't do justice to the accomplishments of our two distinguished speakers. May I now hand over the microphone to Professor Alex Brillantes.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Igno, to my colleague and friend, Vice President Prospero de Vera, of course to Ella Tienza, a classmate, if you may, in Japan. We both studied at Kobe University, and of course Dr. Gatmaytan. So all of you, magandang hapon po. It's always good to be back here at FC. I remember sometime back when I was in college, we would come here and it's still the same, but the quality of discussion continues to improve, I'm sure. So what I'll do today, I have 20 minutes, is just to discuss very quickly what we call the 2 decades of decentralization revolution for the Philippines, accomplishments, challenges, and directions for reform. Obviously, our forum title, the theme really, we talk about this possible perversities, perverted possibilities. It's a nice play of words. And if you look at local governance, I don't know if there's a lot of perversion there, but definitely there's a lot of things that have been done. But more importantly, there are a lot of things that have not been done. We have to move as far as local governance is concerned. And it's within this context I will discuss this discussion, this what we're going to do today. At one point in my life, and perhaps even now, we were working with the primary author of the local government code, Senator Aquino Pimentel. Dr. De Vera and I have been working with him for maybe decades now. And our whole advocacy is really local governance. Why? Kasal, Patay, Binyag, Liping. Kanino nagpupunta sa mga local governments? They don't go straight to the senators. They go to your barangay captains. They go to your mayors, di ba? Kahit manakawan ng kalabaw, mag-away ang mag-asawa, always the village, the barangay. At one point, I myself, I live somewhere near here, no? And there was a quarrel in our subdivision. I was brought, sabi, ihabla kita. Pero kanina nila ako dinala, hindi mo na ako dinala inihabla. I had to go to the barangay, first and foremost. The point is, local governance as frontliners are very, very important. And that's what Aquino himself says, ayusin ng local governance. Kaya hindi pwedeng pabayaan ng local governance. Unfortunately, fortunately, as we speak, the amending this local government code is not yet top in the agenda, but I'll discuss that very quickly later. But all I'm saying in the first part of my presentation, we cannot overemphasize the important role of local governance in development. Equally important, we cannot overemphasize the role of local governance in this thing called bad governance. Marami tayong magagaling na local governance yan, marami rin mga sirabulo. So people have said, you have the decentralized powers and local governments to the local government. Yes, in 1991, they transferred powers and authorities to local governments, but many have said, hindi lang ng kapangyarihan ang inilipat ninyo eh. You also have decentralized corruption. So it's basically the same thing. And that's the perversion that is being talked about here, wherein you have what's called elite capture, as all of us in political science would say. But for me, I would like to look at it as a bottle, if you may, that is half empty and half full. Titingnan natin sa aking presentation, next few more minutes, 17 minutes, that I'd say it's half full. But hey, we have to look at the half empty dimension. I have a few slides, okay? So that's the context. We have to look at local governance as frontline. So this is my quick overview and framework, local government issues and concerns. 20 years na tayo may local government code. Alam niyo, Thailand, Indonesia, I'm actually doing a research right now with some colleagues in the region wherein we're comparing Thailand, Indonesia, and the Philippines. Thailand, they just did local governance autonomy 1998, 1999. Indonesia, 2019, about the same time. 10 years sila. Tayo sa Pilipinas, 20 years. Question, how far have they gone and how far are they going? Equally important, how far have we gone? I tell my friends one time, maybe a few years back, I went to Makassar in Indonesia and I said, you guys are lucky. Why? Because, you know, you don't have to repeat our mistakes. We have had a lot of mistakes in doing local governance. So avoid them. And in this forum I attended, I think 2 weeks ago in Tokyo, pinag-usapan namin to, yung mga mistakes, yung mga advances ng local governance. The point is, there are a lot of issues, a lot of concerns. I'll talk about some policy recommendations. Dr. Tigno mentioned that there are a lot of issues, there are a lot of studies being done today, and I happen to have participated in one of these things. What I will do would be just to pick up from a report we did for an international organization, wherein we did a 2-year study amending, to look at amendments to the local government code. Of course, we've been doing this with the Office of Central Whittington, the Committee on Local Government. As a matter of fact, we're also working right now with the Committee of Local Government of Senator Marcos. He's the Committee on Chair of Local Government. At one point, I asked Noynoy Aquino. He came to the college a couple of times, actually, College of Public Administration. And I knew he's a committee chair and said, sir, we'd like to help you because we know we're doing amendments of the local government. And yes, let's do it. So he said, you come to us and we will offer our services. But like what you said, we haven't heard from that, no? And he was the chairman of the Committee on Local Government. So right now, with the present chairman, i.e. Mr. Bongbong Marcos, not Mr. Marcos, we're usapan po natin. The point is, it is very important that we work on frontliners. Okay? So, policy options and recommendations, we have had a number of policy proposals, and then institutional arrangements and amending the code. What are the chances? On the balance, 20 years, people say, alam mo yung local government code din, 20 years niyan, 20 years na, palpak. Sasabi ko man, alam mo yung local government code, maraming ang palpak, pero 20 years, hey, you should look at it, and this is what I've told my friends in the region, you should look at it from a broad historical perspective. For the longest time, we've had very, very centralized politico-administrative structure. Very, very centralized. Tapos babalik ta rin mo yan. So, syempre, parang both, it takes time to turn back, di ba? So, it's the inertia of too much centralization. So, sa aking paningin, it's good that, hey, what we have done, so sasabihin ko, it's only been 20 years. Instead of saying it's already been 20 years, what I would say is, it's only been 20 years and look how far we've gone. Para bang incurable optimist at one point. Pero it's good to be optimistic, otherwise it's not worth living. At one point in our professional life, again with Professor De Vera, we worked on, among others, identifying good and best practices. Galing po practices. Outstanding law, marami dyan. Marami magagaling. Pero marami rin mga sira-ulo. So what I'm saying is that we have to look at it from both perspectives. So, on the balance, the effects of the code, meron enabling framework. Ano ito? Yung local government code. At least nandyan yan. Alam niyo kung walang local government code, walang mangyayari. In fact, the code as it is today will not even pass because to a certain extent, it has transferred massively powers and authorities to local governments. Pati kami sa college, nung pampanon ni Marcos, alam ba niyo, of course, if you were not born, dito, nagdedemo kami dito. Pero ang panon pa ni Marcos, alam niyo, 1983, gumawa siya ng local government code. Yung tinatawag na batas pambansa bilang 337, if I'm not mistaken. Kami sa college, tumulong kami doon. Pero baka naman ako, no? But ang point ko, we've talked about local governance. Matagal na natin pinag-usapan. But nowhere has it been more radical than the 1991 local government code. Ang daming nilipat, unang-una. More than 70,000 have been transferred. Ikalawa, inilipat sa kanila ang a lot of resources. Dati-dati, 3% lang. 3% ng taxes na pupunta sa local government. Ngayon, it's about 40%. Kulang pa rin. Pero sa akin pa rin, from 3% to 40%, it's not bad. But part of the amendments is we want to increase it about 50%. Why not? Because we have to put our money where our mouth is. For instance, in Japan, most of the resources are to local governments. I'm not saying we should be like Japan, we should be like Indonesia, but the point is, it's very important as students of political science and public administration for us to look at a comparative perspective. Kaya tayo third world studies, tingnan natin yung mga experience ng mga iba't ibang karating bansa. Nangunguna ba tayo? Yes and no. Usapan natin. Pero ayan, at least may enabling framework. Meron tayong batas. Strong leadership. Marami magagaling dyan. We've seen outstanding leaders, even the President Secretary, yung sasabi kanina ni Dr. Tigno, walang sinabi si President Aquino. Yes and no. Inapoint naman yung isang outstanding local leader, si Cheso Bredo. Pero question, he was a very outstanding local government official nung Naga City. But of course, the jury is still out as far as he being the head of the DILG. Kasi alam mo, I used to work in DILG. Dalawang sector namin dyan, interior and local government. No? I was in the local government side. Many times, pag nag-attend ako ng meeting, tataka ko, bakit karap ko itong mga general na ito? Bakit karap ko itong mga police? But the idea is, local governments and peace and order are very much concerned of local at the local level. But you know, he appointed Secretary Robredo, and I think that I think is a very good sign. And Secretary just has really focused on local governments, and his innovations on that side are excellent. I will not talk about the interior side because that's not my expertise. But if you talk about local government side, marami pong magandang ginawa yan. Halimbawa, yung pag may measure ng performance ng local governments, meron tinatawag na performance challenge fund. Makukuha mo lang kapag dalawa. Kapag magaling ang local government mo, unang-una, wala kang adverse findings. Ibig sabihin, may COA, wala nang adverse findings ng COA, you're okay. It will give you what they call a seal of good housekeeping. Number two, and this is very much part of this whole ideology of transparency, dapat nakapost sa web ang lahat ng mga expenses saan napupuntang IRA. So not bad. Why? At least you guys in political science, when I was taking political science, remember input, conversion, output, meron tayong tinatawag na black box doon. Black box, we don't know what's going on. Kaya nga tayo nagkakabulilyaso eh. Pero yung black box eh, dapat transparent. And in the local government code, itong under the present dispensation, they say that it should be transparent. Why not? Of course, but the jury is still out. But the point is, ideologically, it's there. So, meron in the framework, nabanggit ko yung strong leadership, marami tayong magaling na LG leaders, we can talk about that later. And I'd like to mention Secretary Robredo as, in a way, a paragon. But, you know, leadership at the local level is I guess you might call it situational. You have leadership that talk about participation. You also have leaders that talk about the need for authoritarian leadership. For me, the best example would be paragons of governance, Robredo and this guy, Bayani Fernando. You know, hey, come on. This guy also was a paragon of governance, but we can talk about that. No? But the point is, a lot of it is situational. Yung sinasabi ni Naela sa inyong discussion will lead to transformational leadership. I'll keep it in time, don't worry, I'll be annoyed. Number 3 is improved access to financial resources. Yes, may pera talaga. Pero ang question, saan ba napupunta yung pera? Kaya nga dapat alam natin anong yung nangyayari sa black box ni Easton. Input, conversion, Easton, Shankansi, ata yun, di ba yung natawag natin system, walang kamatayang systems analysis. Hanggang ngayon nakakita pa ng mga thesis, mga dissertation, ginagamit yung input, conversion, output na yan. It's related to Easton and Shankansi, I don't know. Pero tinapahin natin yan. Okay naman, if it works, why, if it doesn't, if it ain't broke, why fix it? Gawin natin Philippines na. Pero ang point ko, yung black box na marami sa atin hindi alam ang nangyayari. Stronger interlocal government. Alam mo yung interlocal government partnerships, marami yan. Kamanawa, that's Caloocan, Malabon, Napotas. Di ba yung flood, hindi lang man limited sa Malabon eh. Walang pakialam yung flood kahit na, o yung lamok. Hindi nasasabi, dito lang ako Quezon City. Puputin. Ang point ko rito, local governments have to enter into cooperation with each other. I'm from Baguio. And in Baguio, we work with nearby municipalities in Benguet, etc. But we have a watershed. The watershed doesn't say only Baguio, only Benguet. It cuts across. Solid waste management. Ang point is local governments have to enter into intergovernmental cooperation kagaya ng sa Iloilo, Dante B, etc. The point is, when we talk about local governments, we should recognize that local governments are only artificial. They should artificial boundaries, just like the state. I remember attending a forum dito sa atin dito when we talk about imagining the nation. Ganun din, imagining the local government. Kasi yung mga boundaries natin ay artificial lang naman eh. Kasi yung lamok, hindi naman hihinto sa boundary ng Quezon City. Walang pakialam yung lamok, basta kakagatin niya. Kaya kapag tayo nagkakaroon ng dengue, all of us have to work together. When we talk about environment, all of us have to work together. Ang point is local government have to enter into alliances. What I'm saying is, these are some of the developments. Wider participation, well, civil society. Many people say, eto naman, it's running out of our ears. Georgie and I, 10 years ago, Dr. Tigno and I were involved, maybe 20 years ago, matagal na eh. We were involved in this thing called GO Watch. GO, government, NGO, non-government. Nung hindi pa uso yung mga watch, meron kami sinimula 1989, GO Watch. 1989, 1990, saying that we have to look at the extent to which government and non-government participate. Of course, ngayon, usong-uso yung tatawag natin na PPP, maraming mga ganun. But the point is, under the local government code, you have partnerships between. So that's also, sabi ko, these are some of the good effects. If you may, finally, a broader role for the leagues. Marami tayong mga leagues. Dati-dati, ang mga the spokespersons, if you may, or spokes-institutions of the leagues of the local government were the DILG, which is really presidential creation. I'm under the president. But ngayon, the leagues themselves, alam pa ninyo that many times the leagues have brought the national government to court. Up to today, even as we speak, yung natawag natin na conditional cash transfer, yung natawag natin mga memo ng DILG, a lot of them feel that, dapat may wider role ang local government. Kapag hindi ma-involve ang local government, then dinadala sa korte. Pati yung pag-capture nila sa IRA, Internal Revenue Allotment. Yung IRA po, pwera ng national government na inililipat sa local government, pero ang mahalaga po, hindi dapat i-withhold ng national government. Many times, during the time of during the time of Ramos, during the time of Estrada, even during the time of Cory, na withhold po yung IRA. Dinala sila sa korte, dinala din Senator Pimentel, dinala din Governor Mandanas. At nanalo mga korte. Ang point ko, mas assertive ngayon ang LGU. Maganda yun. Hindi na yung yes ng yes nung panahon ni Marcos. Kasi nung panahon ni Marcos, meron tayong tinatawag na decentralization, pero nung panahon ni Marcos, it was really mostly administrative decentralization but political centralization. Finally, a broader look. But there are some emerging questions. Meron pa rin mga issue. Unang-una, kulang. As we say in Ilocano, awanti kwarta. But money will never be enough. So question is, how do local governments raise resources? We have seen areas where they enter into build, operate, transfer, they float funds, etc., etc. But it doesn't adequate. So our advocacy is yung internal revenue allotment na 40% dapat i-increase to 50%. Number two, ang aming advocacy po, or is really, yung paglipat ay dapat baguhin yung formula. Nung nandito ka sa Diliman, meron ko sa formula. It's really formula. And we talk about the fact that ang formula dati is population, land area, and equal share. It doesn't mean anything. Bakit? Sapagkat ang role ni national is yun to equate, to distribute, to democratize. Pero yung mga mayaman na LG, kagaya ng Quezon City, kagaya ng Makati, bakit nabibigyan ng internal revenue allotment using the same formula? Mali po yun. Kailangan baguhin. Introduce what we call a poverty index. Number two, introduce a performance index. Ibig sabihin, kapag local government code mo hindi nagpa-perform, siguro hindi dapat mabigyan. So, yung natawag na ng seal of good housekeeping might be one. Ikalawa, weak national and local capacity. Nung nasa DLG po ako, ilang beses sinasabi, strengthen local government, strengthen local government. Sige, strengthen kami na strengthen. May mga program na strengthen. Alam mo, nalimutan namin, and this I tell our friends, we forgot to strengthen national government. Very, very presumptuous si national government. Akala niya magaling na siya. Alam mo, under a period of evolution, dapat is i-capacitate din ng national government. Ikalawa, last, unclear and inadequate corporate taxing powers, yung ano ba, mga pwede nilang sources of revenue, and what are their powers dito. Pumunta ka dito sa Ateneo, alam mo mga barangay dyan, mayroon nang nilagay na barangay parking lot. Have they been brought to court? I don't know, but the point is, local governments say, mag-charge kami ng parking fees, why not? Ngayon, may pa mga passing fees, etc. Dapat iklaruhin. But ito yung gawin siguro mga ating mga. So, this involves some next steps. Natatapos na po ako, Dr. Lino. So, ito yung mga pinag-usapan ko, financial autonomy, counterparting, capacity building. Huwag natin kalimutan capacity national. Huwag mayapang si national kasi siya rin ay walang capacity o kulang. People participation, pero pag participate, kailangan din naman na within the context of democracy. We can talk about the inter-energy. The federalism, that's really the favorite of ours. We talk about federalism, but really, I call it, at least ang advocacy namin, is the next step in the evolution. The whole idea po, transfer powers and authorities within the context of subsidiarity to the local governments as much as possible. And we believe that federalism is really an option. Last slide, I'll talk about that. If you want to copy this, I'll give this to you, of course. No? You can even use it. Not sure. Okay, we need to reform. Kailangan reform. Status quo is unacceptable. sabi ko, look at the glass that's half full rather than half empty. May mga advances, may mga kukulang. Pero alam niyo, kailangan magbago. Sa akin pa rin ko, we're doing a research actually on this. When we do reform, and this could be within the context of political administration, kailangan baguhin po yung mga batas. Kailangan baguhin ang local government code. At yun po yung napag-usapan natin. Pero kulang po yun. You just don't amend the law. End of story. Why? Ang dami-dami natin mga batas dito sa ating bansa. Ang daming batas na hindi sinusunod. Do you know that we have I think earlier I was saying 70 anti-corruption laws, more than 40 anti-corruption bodies, yet we are the most corrupt nation. So it's not really the law. The law is simply not implemented. So yung level po ay hindi lang mga batas, pero kailangan baguhin mga batas. Kailangan rin baguhin ang ating mga pag-iisip, reform the mindsets, reform the way we look at things. Our perspectives, kailan baguhin po yung perspektibo ni national na hindi kaya ng local, yung perspektibo ng local na hindi kaya ng national. It's really a reform mindset. I don't know, short of lobotomy, I don't know. But anyway, we have to change the perspective. Yan ang kalaban natin talaga. Ang katlo po, leadership. Leadership really matters. Leadership matters. At one point, I mentioned our work with Dr. De Vera. He was once the head of the CLCD, Center for Leadership. We focus on changing leaders. We focus on identifying outstanding leaders. Leadership matters. At the national level, at the international level, makikita nyo, mahalagang po ang liderato. At yung last po ay citizens engagement. Things will not happen if you let the people are not involved. And they have to move towards a common vision. So this is a framework I think that would work. So with that, I've spent about 20 minutes, but all I'd like to say is when we talk about local governments, it's been 20 years, marami tayong mga advances, marami rin dapat gawin, but for me, I don't think it's so bad. Let's continue working on local governance and pushing for autonomy, because at the end of the day, local governance is participation and local governance is democratization, which is what you and I have to do as far as governance is concerned. Thank you very much. Maraming salamat.
Thank you, Dean Alex. I must say that even without the time limit, Dean Alex has that remarkable capability of giving us so many ideas in a very short period of time. So it is really the audience that needs to catch up in terms of the ideas that many ideas that he is able to express. May we turn our attention now to Professor Gatmaytan.
President Rivera, my colleagues in the faculty, Director Atienza, Professor Ligo, and the Brillantes students, thank you for giving me this opportunity. Now, what I'm going to do, I had, of course, some difficulty in addressing the questions that were raised by the organizers of the forum. So I'm going to change things a little bit and try to assess, if I can, answer the questions indirectly by looking at what the administration is doing in terms of local governance. Then maybe we can see what their intentions are in terms of addressing local governance concerns. Okay? And in other words, that's the best I can do because I can't read minds. I can't read the president's mind. How does this work? I don't know. My accident of history, Noy's performance will always be measured against his mother's. Because the fact is that it was during his mother's administration when RA 7160 was enacted. And in her case, she really thought a lot about the potential impact of 7160, and to her, it's a huge deal. And it is part of the entire democratization project that she believed she was heading, or that she believed we're all in. And this is how she looked at it. could not find any official statement by then candidate Benigno Aquino regarding the local government code. But as I said earlier, his administration after a year has done certain things that would indicate how they regard the code and what direction they plan to go. And as you can see here, I'm not entirely pleased with what I've seen. Okay. There are some of us in the College of Law who do not understand the concept of restraint. So when we speak, it's going to be fun. There are three incidents that I want to look at, or want us to look at, and I think they all tend to they will tell us something about where we're headed in terms of local government. The first one, the response to the hostage-taking crisis in Manila a year ago, more than a year ago. That issue tells us something about the accountability of local officials. The second one is the position taken by Secretary Robredo on open pit mining in South Cotabato. That one has a lot to do with the power of control and supervision that the President has. And the third, which is pending with the Supreme Court right now, is the postponement of the ARM elections and Aquino's plan to appoint an OIC in the meantime. Hostage taking, pictures are good. Wala lang. Because it's a good picture, that's why. Now, we know the tragedy that happened in August 23 last year. 8 tourists died because, well, our police apparently are not trained to deal with this kinds of situations. Those of us who are old enough, we know this. Every time you have a standoff and you're watching it on TV, it will end this way and people will die. Ganyan talaga yan. So we weren't surprised. Tingnan talaga yung since we're whether they're bank robbers or whatever, people die. But this one though, I'm not saying it's it's any kind of an excuse. It's not. And so, what did the president do? Well, you're the president. You have a big problem because the entire world is watching you make a mistake in the news. And so President Aquino directed the Department of Justice and the DILG to conduct an investigation of the tragedy, of course. And as a result of that study, the Incident Investigation and Review Committee indicted or suggested or recommended that certain criminal and administrative charges be filed against the Puno, Interior Secretary at the time, former then the Director of the Philippine National Police, and more importantly, Mayor Alfredo Lim. Now, Aquino's problem is these are his friends. These are his friends and his political allies who are all in charge of that fiasco in Manila. So, what did the president do? Well, he decided to do nothing. Nothing insofar as Puno and Versosa are concerned. But in the case of Lim, at least he did something. He also rejected the idea that we should, that his actions require that he be punished criminally. What did he do anyway? A lot. This is an excerpt from the official report. A lot. I don't even understand some of this, but apparently there's a crisis management committee and the mayor has a very specific role in that task, which he did not perform by the book. And that is why people died. Okay. So there's a list of charges against him, among others, towards the end. Failure to perform his duties as CMC chairman, as discussed in the previous section, constituting dereliction of duty and gross negligence in accordance with Section 60 of 7160. That is the local government code. That is what came out in the report. This is the President's response. That he will initiate administrative proceedings against him for misconduct in office and simple neglect. none of the stuff that was mentioned earlier, just negligence and misconduct and simple neglect. And his case will be referred to the Chief for appropriate proceedings. No criminal charges. And what does Section 60 say anyway? If you look at it, misconduct is there in paragraph C. See it? There is no simple negligence. There is gross negligence. So if they plan to use Section 60 against the mayor, how does one go about it? Well, you file a verified complaint against the official, and if it is a mayor in a highly urbanized city, before the office of the president. So, I don't think mayor has anything to worry about, because the president has already virtually absolved him of any wrongdoing. By refusing to follow the recommendations of the review committee, by saying the only thing he did wrong was negligence, simple neglect, simple neglect and misconduct, nothing serious. When the case comes to the office of the president, I'm pretty sure he's going to be just fine. So that's my problem with what I saw, because autonomy, the devolution of functions under 7160, lahat itong nakita natin, does not preclude going after airing officials. The transformation that 7160 wanted to accomplish includes holding local officials accountable. And this incident with the hostage taking goes against that goal of stronger autonomy. Autonomy doesn't mean they get away with things. Autonomy means you go after the ones who are bad. What we referred to here earlier as Siraulo. Was it? Siraulo? That was the term you used, right? Many times. And that's it. And in fact, if you read the entire report, Mayor Lin would his actions apparently require that he be held accountable at some level. Okay, that's the first one. Open mining. The issue here is control and supervision. And issues are good. That's Robredo, Secretary Robredo. As Brillantes said, he is a legendary figure in local governance. He and Naga City have won virtually every award that can be won. So just an example of a good local official, that would be a great one. Right? Entire studies are written about him. Here's my problem. South Cotabato has a ban on open pit mining. And Secretary Robredo says it's unconstitutional. He says it's unconstitutional because the 1995 Mining Act doesn't ban open pit mining, and therefore local government units cannot ban open pit mining. And then he says in the third paragraph, in view thereof, you are hereby enjoined to cause the immediate suspension of the implementation of the ordinance. He ordered a governor to suspend an ordinance. Is that a good thing? No. My assessment is this. On that one story, on that single story, three issues come out legally, all of which are not good. Secretary Robredo, in my view, his analysis is wrong. His rationale for forcing the province to suspend its ordinance is wrong. He also exercise control over local officials, which he cannot do under the Constitution. The President has the power of supervision and not control. And third, he usurped judicial functions when he said that ordinance is unconstitutional. Okay, I'm not watching the time zones. I hope someone will tell me when it's done. Alright. If the national law doesn't prohibit it, there is nothing to prohibit a local government unit from doing something. Okay? And in all these cases that I cite here, what the Supreme Court is saying is, it makes a lot of difference. Nothing in the national law except media, in this case, to apply for a license. In other words, if they are already licensed by the national government, there is nothing inherently wrong if a local government unit requires that they also secure a license at the local level. There's nothing wrong with that. And in fact, in Orongopos case, in another case, the mayor cannot stop a drugstore from operating if the food FDA says it can. But it can stop them from operating if they violate a local ordinance. So those are two separate requirements. And so I don't understand where Secretary Robredo is coming from. A local government unit can impose additional environmental safeguards by ordinance. As long as there is no, it doesn't contradict the national law. And it doesn't. Next. Power of control. The president cannot tell a local government official to change their laws. The only thing they can do under the Constitution is tell them that they are probably not following the law. That's a huge difference. They can only say, you're not following the law. They cannot say, your ordinance is void, do not implement it. That amounts to control. That is unconstitutional. Robredo did exactly that. Cannot do that. The president's authority is limited to seeing to it that the rules are followed. That's it. Okay? And insofar as usurping judicial functions is concerned, the courts determine whether an ordinance is unconstitutional or invalid. The secretary cannot do it. The president cannot do it. So that's 3 in a row, 3 violations of the Constitution in one single act of Secretary of State. Next. Is it fair to blame Aquino for Robredo's actions? Yes, because under our regime, the acts of the Secretary are the acts of the President. Unless the President reverses Robredo, those are his actions. So, he's just as liable as the Secretary Robredo. And that's what I just said that. And finally, the ARM elections, this one I think is pretty straightforward. They want to postpone the elections and synchronize it with the next local elections. In the meantime, they want to appoint under Section 3 of that law the governor, the vice governor, the executives of the ARM. And that's also wrong. But the case is pending with the Supreme Court. And it says they've been enjoined a temporary restraining order. So that if by September 30, that is tomorrow, that's how current this topic is, the court has not made a ruling. Ngayon, incumbent officials shall continue to be the officials in a holdover capacity. Walang mag-a-appoint. That is the effect of the Supreme Court's decision so far. Okay? But, you know, when you're talking about autonomous regions, the president's powers are even more limited. The autonomous regions yan, what they enjoy is political autonomy, not administrative autonomy. Kung may maraming bawal sa presidente, there are so many things the president cannot do to Quezon City or to South Cotabato, all the more if you're talking about an autonomous region. And the idea that you're appointing officials talaga is just violates the entire concept behind self-rule. Especially since they have a statement saying anyone can apply. Even people with pending criminal cases, everyone apply. And that's the problem that I have. And because we only have 20 minutes. If you want to assess the administration of Aquino, the early indications are that things are not that great. But of course, he has 5 more years to make things right. Okay? That's it for now, because that's 20 minutes. Maraming salamat po.
My apologies, Professor Gatmaytan, for warning you a bit early. But actually, we are about 2 minutes early in the start of the open forum. So we now open the floor for interventions, questions, comments. insights that you might have. If you have a question, please refer to or please identify the speaker that you want to address the question to. And if you have a comment, please make it as brief as possible so that we can accommodate as many people as we can. So, sino po ang nais magpahiwatig ng kanyang opinion, kanyang ideya?
Good afternoon. Ako si Noli Otlas, alumni ng UP, from UP School of Economics. My question is directed to Dr. Alex Brillantes. I think that is rather limiting I think I find your definition of subsidiarity as from central to this local government rather limiting. No? The principle of subsidiarity is given to the lowest unit. And the lowest unit is the individual. No? It can be the household. It's students' education. When you teach student, huwag kayong magdumi, huwag kang kumain ka ng maluri so that you can have good health, magugas ka ng kamay. You don't need the government to tell them, you don't need parents, things like that. You need people that if you don't want to have lung cancer, you don't drink and smoke and all those things. No? So a lot of those things that are actually done by the government, national or local, actually forbidden by the local, by the individual or the household. And also, you don't need government function for some time. But that's it. If we really want the principle of subsidiarity, you really have to put a lot of roles to civil society and individual. It's more personal responsibility. Point number one. And point number two, I'm not really that fan of local government decentralization. I live in Makati, and you know that some of the idiotic and parasitic policies that can be done by local government. Like if you have an office, sarili mong opisina, i-renovate mo yung kusina lang, sabihin ng local government ng City Hall, no, you cannot do that. You have to get permit to renovate from me. Otherwise, we will harass you. After you get permit to occupy na naman. For every permit, an equivalent fee. Soon, you will not even if you just repair your own garage or your own bedroom. You will get a permit from City Hall. Like our office is in Aksa, Buendia, just go across the street. I was not feeling well. I have to go cross the street, go to Mercury Doctor, the City Hall. So I said, you have to go around. Look, I'm not feeling well. I don't care, because they pay 200 pesos man. Parang you're supposed to be a rich local government, but it's like a patay buto when it comes to all something. To cross the street, penalty 200 pesos. Towing, just motorcycle, just parking pedestrian is 1,000 pesos, Ang daming mga, and that's why what local government centralization has achieved is to decentralize stupidity at the national level to the local government level. So I think that it's just, the role of government is not maraming bawal. Ang bawal ang parking dito, bawal mag-U-turn, bawal tumawid. Pag sila lahat naman pwede. So a lot of idiocy that's happening are actually perpetrated by the local government. So when we really want this subsidiarity, stopping giving more power to the local government may be a good formula to expand the industry in government. Thank you.
Alex?
Well, I was primarily the context of the discussion was within the context of a political administrative system, and really we devolved to local governments, subsidiarity, powers that can be done at the lowest level possible should be done. Halimbawa, tricycle. Do you know that even before the local government code, yung pag-register ng tricycle, that was a national function, which is really stupid. So dapat binaba. Okay. After having said that, I agree with you. I mean, we now go into the broader discourse of the role of government. Yeah, there are those who say, why not just privatize government? Why not just regardless of whether it's national or local. Why not just abolish it? You know, but we will go back to the whole philosophy of political science, role of government, etc., etc. But if you know in the framework, obviously I agree with you. You cannot do everything by laws alone. But if you look at the second part, we talk about changing the mindsets of the people. Stupidity. I agree with you. Why do people cross that? You cross anywhere, you know, kung masagasaan ka. But of course, that's why you have this thing. These are laws that we do as a collective, as you know, this whole contracting, social contracting. So I agree with you, but I think we should somehow disentangle the discussion and really say, when we talk about the role of government, what is the proper role of national, what is the proper role of local? I was really talking within the context of the role of government. No? Now, if you want individuals to do the things they do, I mean, I agree, it's freedom, but I'd like you to know that when we talk about reform, we certainly agree that at the end of the day, it's really the individual, it's his mindset, it's his stupidity or his wisdom. You know, as far as this is concerned, and you and I know, we in the Philippines know that really, yung kung may lulusot talaga tayo. Let's face it, that's why we are one of the most corrupt nations in this part of the world. You know, because it's at the level of the individual. Why don't we pay taxes? Alam mo, just to give you an example, dito sa stoplight dito, right in front of, what's this, land transportation office. There's a stoplight. Do people stop there? They don't stop there. The stoplight, there is a suggestion light. But the stoplight is a stoplight, right? Because if you don't stop, kakaroon ng anarchy. So, I mean, we can go on forever and ever. But what I'm saying, I agree with you, at the end of the day, it's the discipline of the individual. Let me, we can continue, but let me just, very quick, you know, I was talking about Robredo as somebody who, in one sense, epitomized good local governance. But yes, there are a lot of things. So there's this thing in, I don't know what, but when you talk about Miles' law, where you sit is where you stand. Where you stand is where you sit. Nung dating congressman ka, galit na galit ka sa mga local government. Ngayon na ikaw naging gobernador, galit na galit ka sa mga congressman. I don't know if this is happening right now, but you know, sometimes Secretary Jess might also be a victim of the institution. You know, why? Right now, in fact, you know, they just came up with, we can come up with the list of laws, including what you said. I myself did not agree to the postponement, but sometimes I just want to, bakit gusto mo postpone ito? It's really local control. You know, one law that they came out recently, they used the 20% development fund. Pera na ng LGU, si DILG, nandun pa rin para sabihin kung paano gamitin. Is it really a function of the institution? Now, to a certain extent, as an institution, you know, I work in the LG, I know the mindsets of our people are so control-oriented, but there are also many who are pro-autonomy. So, you now have your structural individual who influences. So, kaya dun sa aming partner, nilagay ko doon yung strong leadership. Maybe Secretary just should really stick out his neck in behalf of the LGUs. And maybe, hey sir, if you don't agree with me, as far as the postponed elections, hindi na tayo maghihiwalay. Dito papasok yung leadership na sinasabi ko. So, a lot of it also should be placed within the proper context. A lot of it should also be placed within the dynamic. I mean, there are some of us, and I worked in government for a long time. There are many things that I did that I didn't want to do. Why? Yun ang sabi ni Secretary yun ang sabi ng, ginagawa pa namin yung panahon na ganito. Hindi pa ito, hindi, ginagawa na. So what do you do? Either you resign or you do it. Or you say, yes, let's reform, then they'll call your attention. Sige, goodbye, tapos na po ito. That's why I really enjoy my work in DILG. Really being part of the bowels of the bureaucracy. There's so many things, you're right, there's so many things that are happening because you're really sometimes a victim of the bureaucracy. Hence, I think, if we're talking about reform, change the mindsets. Yung bang, somebody wants to talk about islands of governance, about islands of excellence. Pwede, kaya natin. Otherwise, as you say, ay, pasensya na po kayo. That's one of my favorite. Mabati tayo. We will be left behind. Look what's happening now in the karating bansa. Dati, top 5 tayo sa ASEAN. Now they're comparing us to the rest. Why? Why is this so? Is it our mindset? Is it a poverty mindset, as you would say? Is it something that, are we really corrupt? I really don't know kailangan yung accountabilities, etc. I hope you don't mind. I'll just end with this, Judge, if you don't mind, yung mindset, no? MRT. Paglabas mo sa MRT dito, pagbaba mo sa hagdanan, nagtatakbuhan mga tao. I can't believe they push regardless of you're a man or a woman. Alam niyo, not for anything else, when I was teaching in Japan, just quite recently, and that really amazed me. The trains are so packed. Talagang po, you know, they even hire people to push. Alam mo, paglabas nila sa train, mag-uunahan ba dun sa elevator? Hindi po. They actually fall in line. Kahit nabasan sa train, tapos they fall in line, then they leave one lane open para sa kanang mamadali. Kasi I mean, what is this? It's at the level, I agree with you, it's at the level of the individual, how you are brought up. So siguro if we're talking about change, let's begin with our children. That's why I talked to one local official nung sabi, I won't say, sir, dapat, because he's gonna, dapat ikaw maging presidente ng Pilipinas. Saan sabi niya sa akin? Alam mong gagawin ko pare? Of course, joking. Papatay ko lahat ng 30 years old na ba? Bakit? Kasi hopeless na mga tatanda. Let's work with our children. Education is very... But kidding aside, you know, I would not say we're a lost generation, but we really should work with our children. Kaya, in role of education institutions at the individual level, kasalanan ba ng simbahan? Kasalanan ba ng eskwela? I wouldn't say kasalanan, but responsibilidad natin. Yung area ng values ba? Yung palusot, labas ng tayo. Di ba sila kaanta? Sometimes I walk around here, I get so disgusted. Nagja-jogging, minsan kasama natin, kumakain tapos itatapon mo na yung pera. What is itatapon yung basura? So I end up picking it up and say, hey, pwede mo pakipulot. Why is it? So we go back now, I ended this promise, the conflict between individual and government. What is the role of government? What's the role of the individual? I don't think naman na kapag puro individualistic, will end up you do anything. Huwag din naman siguro yung anarchy. Siguro may role naman si government dito. Because all of us suggest that there should be order.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
I'm Marvin. I had an argument on Facebook this morning. No, I tend to disagree that it's all about values. I mean, maybe that's not what you meant. But I just want to highlight the other side. Because the counterfactual is Filipino overseas, the same Filipino who rides the plane and gets off in Tokyo or in the US lines up. But then the same Filipino comes back even before he is on the plane, he stands up even before the door is open. And what is the reason? Is that a question of values? I think it's also because things don't work outside. There's an institutional issue as well. Because if I'm in Hong Kong, I know that in 23 minutes, I'm in Central. If I take the airport express, so I don't have to rush. Isn't it? So I think we have to balance, because if we say, sorry, my name is Marvin, I forgot, but I was here last time. So I think it has to be a balance, because if I've seen Filipinos, and in fact there's a term in economics, backward thinking supply curve. Why is a Filipino who is considered lazy here? Why does he become very hardworking overseas? He works 2 jobs, 3 jobs. I experienced this in 1986 in Taiwan. No? Somebody works in the hotel of Tanyo, and then he works in a bar in the evening, and then he goes home. He passes by a factory, gets the head of a doll and the body of a doll, so he can assemble it and bring it back for money in the morning. Why? Because there is hope that he can earn enough to send home. Whereas in the Philippines, if you work too hard, even if you work very hard, the taxi driver will never feel that whatever he makes is enough. You know? So there is an institutional issue involved that needs to be fixed as well. And it has to be, I mean, a good example about the traffic is close to where I live, in Rotonda. Why are the traffic enforcers overriding the traffic light? When all that it needs to be done is we teach the people that red is stop, green is go, and then solve the technical problem of the traffic. Why do we go to U-turn stops? So I guess we have to also push in that direction, because we do tend to reinvent. You know, if you go to Marikina from here, it's like you're actually, Bayani was actually teaching the drivers to swerve, right? Because you have to know how the traffic goes so you get to the end very fast. Now, why do we have to reinvent the traffic light system? Why cannot we push that? Because when we cross, we go we follow the rules. Okay? So
No, I totally agree. But if you, I don't know, not for anything else. That is one. It's not really all about values. I certainly agree with you. You have to have the institutional framework. The problem is our institutions here are very weak. The state here is weak. It cannot enforce it. Just look at the stoplights. So at the end of the day, it's really a combination. And I agree with you. I mean, like you know, when you go abroad, nagbabago tayo. Nagbabago yung the way we behave. Why? Because we think we can get away. Hindi tayo humulin. End of story. When I was a young graduate student, I made a left turn somewhere in the States. Nag-left turn ako. Bah, pinara ako. No left turn. I was trying to explain my way. No, he would not even listen to me. ticket. I'm just a student. They didn't care. Dito sa boss, student naman. Okay. So that's it. Because as far as they're concerned, black is black, white is white. You make a left turn. Here's the ticket. Thank you. If you don't believe, kung ayaw mo po din yan, you contest me. $50. Tapos, because it works. Alam mo dito sa ating bansa, pati naman sa Clark, halimbawa, o pati sa Subic, di ba? We stop. Why? Because we are arrested. Di ba? Even in some subdivisions dito, pag wala kang makitang parking, you just park in here. But there are subdivisions na puhulihin ka, hindi ipapato ka. Because, the institutions are implemented. It's true. But it has to be complemented by the value system. So it's not really all values, but I think it is really one of them. So we talk about, really, I think, we continue to look for, I guess, some kind of a golden mean here or something where, but it works in some. But I totally agree with him. It's not all about values. I know about it, I agree naman. The damage culture, that's naman. So, it has to be confident. We need a leader who will really implement. But paano tayo susundo sa batas kung ang liderato ay hindi alam mo isang maganda, not for anything, yung tawag nilang wang-wang. Di ba? I'm sure so many people are so exasperated na hindi sila makapag-wang-wang. Kasi, many times when I was still, pangangarapan ni isang secretary, binawang ako sa likod. I stopped right there, and I told him, bakit naman kayo? Pinakano yung kotse ko. Police ito. What good ang yabang-yabang ko. I try to put up with this guy. Pinano ko, kasi may baril siya. But do you think these people will do it? Hindi na siguro. So maybe we're moving in that direction. But the jury is still out as far as this is concerned. So it's a combination. Sorry, Judge.
I think in order to bring it back to the topic of our forum, we have to ask ourselves, to what extent can the code now bring about this kind of transformation in the way that people look at their institutions, whether it's the national or local, and to what extent can the code, as it is configured now over the last 20 years, to what extent can it now help local governments and other political institutions to address this problem of a weak institutional framework that we have been experiencing. This is not entirely the result of local government code. A lot of the problems that you have raised have actually been manifested even before the code came into effect. So I think that the solution doesn't necessarily lie with changing the code, but perhaps maybe improving it or improving the way that it transforms or reshapes the mindsets of people and institutions. Meron pa ba mga ibang Professor Gatmaytan, would you like to respond to the points that have been raised so far?